The winter wind howled across the empty plains of West Texas like a wounded animal, carrying with it dust, snow, and the quiet desperation of those who had nothing left. Night had already swallowed the land when a lone lantern flickered on the porch of a small wooden ranch house. Inside, Daniel Carter, a quiet cowboy with tired eyes and a scar that ran along his jaw, sat at the kitchen table, slowly sipping black coffee after a long day of work. His ranch wasn't much, a small herd of cattle, a creaking barn, and a lonely house surrounded by miles of nothing. Daniel had grown used to silence after his wife passed away 3 winters ago. Since then, the ranch had become both his refuge and his prison. Just as he lifted the cup to his lips, a faint sound reached his ears. Knock. It was weak, almost like someone didn't have the strength to knock again. Daniel frowned. Nobody traveled these plains at night, especially in winter. Slowly he stood, grabbed his lantern and his old revolver from the table, and walked toward the door. Knock, knock. This time it was softer. He opened the door. Standing there was a woman barely able to remain upright. Snow clung to her thin dress, and her face was pale from exhaustion. In her arms, she carried a small child wrapped in a torn blanket. Her eyes were filled with fear, desperation, and a fragile hope that looked like it could break any second. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "I can warm your bed, milk your cow, clean your house. Please, just feed my child." Daniel felt something inside his chest tighten. The boy in her arms couldn't have been more than 3 years old. His cheeks were hollow, his lips dry, and his tiny body shook from the cold. For a moment the wind howled between them. Daniel had seen suffering before. Outlaws, droughts, hunger, death. The frontier had plenty of it, but something about the way she held that child, like he was the only thing keeping her alive, made his hardened heart pause. "What's your name?" Daniel asked quietly. "Sarah," she whispered, "and this is my son, Tommy." The boy barely opened his eyes. Daniel stepped aside. "Get inside before you both freeze." Sarah hesitated, like she couldn't believe it was real. Then she stepped into the warm light of the house. Daniel closed the door behind them. The warmth hit them instantly. Sarah almost collapsed from relief, clutching Tommy tighter. Daniel quickly placed another log in the fire. "Sit down," he said. "I'll get food." Sarah sat at the table, tears silently rolling down her cheeks as Daniel placed bread, warm stew, and milk in front of her. But she didn't eat first. Instead, she gently fed Tommy. Small spoonfuls, slow and careful. Daniel watched quietly from across the room. Something about that moment, a starving mother feeding her child before herself, stirred memories he had tried for years to bury. Finally, Sarah took a bite herself. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the spoon. After a while, Daniel asked, "Where did you come from?" Sarah swallowed hard. 3 days walking. The town back east. They closed the mill. My husband died last year. No work, no money. Nobody would help. Her voice cracked. I begged, but people stopped opening their doors. She looked up at Daniel, shame flooding her eyes. "I didn't mean what I said at the door. I'm not that kind of woman. I thought maybe if I offered something, anything, someone might help my son." Daniel leaned back in his chair. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "You don't owe me anything." Sarah blinked in disbelief. "You can stay in the spare room tonight. We'll figure the rest tomorrow." Her lips trembled. "Why would you help us?" Daniel stared into the fire. "Because once someone helped me." That night, Sarah and Tommy slept in a real bed for the first time in weeks, but Daniel didn't sleep much at all. He sat by the window staring out at the endless plains, wondering if fate had just delivered something to his door he never expected. Maybe even something he desperately needed. Morning sunlight crept across the plains like a golden blanket, melting the frost that had covered the ranch overnight. Daniel had already been awake for hours, feeding the cattle and repairing a broken fence post, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the woman and child sleeping inside his house. He wasn't used to company, especially not the kind that brought memories with them. When he stepped inside, the smell of fresh coffee filled the kitchen. Sarah stood near the stove, nervously stirring a pot of oatmeal. "I hope you don't mind," she said quickly when she saw him. "I woke early and thought I could help." Daniel glanced around. The kitchen table was clean. The floor had been swept. Even the dishes from the night before were washed. Tommy sat quietly in a chair, slowly eating oatmeal with both hands. For the first time since Daniel had seen him, the boy looked warm and safe. Daniel nodded. "You work fast." Sarah lowered her eyes. "It's the least I can do." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Tommy suddenly spoke. "Mama, is this our house now?" Sarah froze, her eyes filled with tears again. Daniel looked at the small boy, then back at Sarah. The truth was, he hadn't thought that far, but when he saw the fear in Sarah's face, the fear that they might be sent back into the cold world, something inside him made a decision. "You can stay," Daniel said simply. Sarah looked up in shock. "Really?" "I could use help around the ranch." And the boy, well, every place could use a little noise. Tommy grinned for the first time. Sarah covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "Thank you," she whispered. Days turned into weeks. Sarah worked harder than anyone Daniel had ever known. She cooked, cleaned, helped with the animals, and even learned to milk cows before sunrise. Tommy followed Daniel everywhere, asking endless questions about horses, cattle, and cowboy life. Something strange began happening to the quiet ranch. It started to feel alive again. Laughter replaced silence. Footsteps replaced loneliness, and one evening, as the sun painted the sky red over the Texas plains, Sarah stood beside Daniel watching the cattle return to the barn. "You saved us," she said softly. Daniel shook his head. "No, you saved this place." He looked toward the house, where Tommy was chasing chickens across the yard. "For the first time in years, this ranch feels like a home again." Sarah's eyes shimmered. "You didn't just feed my child," she said. "You gave us a future." Daniel didn't answer right away. Then he spoke quietly. "You remember what you said the night you arrived?" Sarah lowered her head in embarrassment. "I remember." Daniel smiled slightly. "You offered to warm my bed." Her face turned red instantly. "But you ended up warming something else." She looked confused. Daniel glanced toward the glowing house window. "My heart." Sarah's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of hope. Because sometimes the greatest stories aren't about heroes or battles. Sometimes they're about a tired cowboy who opened a door and a desperate mother brave enough to knock. And if you enjoyed this powerful story of kindness, survival, and second chances, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because many more unforgettable Western stories are coming soon.